Hello everybody and welcome to my channel on Living the Lie, where we discuss everything narcissistic abuse, sociopathic abuse, and domestic violence. We delve deep into these topics. And today's topic is narcissistic supply. What is that? We all talk about it in the survivor community all the time. Oh, well, they're seeking narcissistic supply, or oh, they're with the new supply. What is supply? I mean, most of us know what it is, but let's dissect it a little bit. Let's go a little deep and get a deep understanding of what supply is, because this is really what drives the narcissist. And this is what makes them a narcissist, because normal, healthy people don't do these things. We don't seek other people to fill us up. Now, sometimes when you're traumatized and you get caught up in codependency and you get caught up in people pleasing, it appears that you're trying to use other people for self-esteem. But it's not the same as the way a narcissist does it. When you're a codependent and you're traumatized, you're people-pleasing as a way to survive. You're people-pleasing people that are narcissists and that are abusers because, like I said, it's survival. You don't know how your life is going to be from one minute to the next, so you've adapted these traits of just making everybody happy to avoid conflict. That's not what narcissists do. In fact, they love conflict. Their very being is conflict. They love it. It gives them supply. So what is the supply that they're seeking? It's significance. They want to seek significance and importance. They want to be seen as important and significant, as special, as wonderful, as this amazing person. It's very important to them. They believe they will perish if they do not get outward validation. And that's what supply is to them. It's energy. They have no inner sense of self. They have no inner authenticity. They do not know who they are or what they are. This comes from their upbringing. Now, the psychopath scientists and experts have discovered that the actual psychopath, the antisocial, is born that way. They have a different chemical system within their body that is not the same as regular humans. Now, the narcissist and the sociopath to a degree, all sociopaths have narcissistic traits, but the narcissist desperately seeks the approval of the outside world, and they care very, very much how they are perceived. And this is because they have no inner sense of self. They grew up without having an inner sense of self. Their caregivers did not teach them that they themselves are valuable. They did not give them proper attachment. They didn't get love the way a human being is supposed to be loved and nurtured. They were given, probably it could go either way. They could have been extremely abused and neglected. So then as a result, they didn't form proper attachments to their caregivers. So they learned to mask. They learned to mirror other people, so they knew how to behave as a human being in society, because their family life wasn't conducive to that, did not teach them to be individual and to have empathy for other people and to put themselves in other people's shoes, because their caregivers didn't do that. Their caregivers were most likely probably narcissists as well. Now, there are times when the parents are not narcissists, and it could be that the child was overly indulged. They were told that they were fantastic and wonderful, and if they wanted something, they were just given something. They were taught that they would get love from their parents through achievements and through outward things that they did. They were not given love for just being who they are. Who they were wasn't important to the parent. The parent saw them as an extension of themselves and didn't nurture that inner being. So that inner being that all of us have, the narcissist wasn't given that. It wasn't watered, for lack of a better way. Like, think of it as like this plant inside, this little seed inside of you when you're born, of your inner self, and the caregivers have to water it. And how do you water it? By you give your child love and compassion. You tell them that they can be anything that they want, that all that matters is that they are a good person, and that parents didn't teach them to treat other people with respect. The parents taught them that, you know, nobody will respect you unless you have money. Nobody will like you unless you have these things. Nobody's ever going to like you because you're a terrible child. You know, the two extremes is most likely how the narcissist was brought up. And as a result of those two extremes, where there was no balance in the middle, where there was no caretaker that was an empathic person teaching this little person how to grow and develop and have a sense of self, and to trust life and to trust themselves, and to know that when something stressful happens in life, and those things are gonna happen in life, they're not given any tools. They're not taught that, oh, well, you know what, I'm just gonna do it again. And you know what, it doesn't matter what those people think of me, because I know who I am inside, because mommy and daddy told me who I am. They helped me see who I am, and I know I'm a good person, so next time I'm gonna try again. And some people might criticize me, some people might not. I don't care. See, that's a healthy sense of self. And if you don't have the proper upbringing by your adult caretakers, you usually don't have a good sense of self. And again, don't confuse the narcissist with a codependent. Now, narcissists have codependency traits, but it's their narcissism. A person that's a people pleaser and traumatized, that runs around getting their validation by helping others and doing things for others, is not a narcissist. It's a damaged person. It's probably a person that has been damaged by narcissists. So if you have narcissistic parents, you could go either way. You could go to the opposite and become an empath and a people pleaser, and or you can become like the parent and be the narcissist. So that's how they're created. There's all different dynamics, and of course every situation is different, every person is different, and experts know, they agree that the narcissist and the sociopath are pretty much created, but they don't know exactly why. And I guess we'll never know exactly why that individual developed into a narcissist, whereas the other person who had the same type of family upbringing developed into an empath, and a person that had codependency, and a person that says, I'm never going to do this. I don't understand why my parents were this way, but I'm not going to be this way with my parents. I'm going to love my children and teach them love. So it could happen. Either one can happen. And oftentimes in families with narcissistic parents, one will become a narcissist, and the others will most likely be traumatized codependents. And the difference is, though, they have a different constitution. If they're an empath, they have an intuitive ability that they were born with that enables them to connect with their inner self and their inner resources. And those inner resources of who they are covered up by all the damage and the trauma, and so they go around overly hypervigilant to other people's emotions and other people's feelings to make sure there's no drama or abuse. Whereas the narcissistic child that grows up is going to learn to exploit others to get what they need, so that they think that they get this false sense of feeling safe, and they wear this mask because they didn't, for whatever reason, develop an inner sense of self. So the supply comes from that. That's the root of why they seek supply. If you have any questions, feel free to put the questions here in the comments, or send me an email, or check me out on other areas of social media where we talk about the narcissistic supply. Like, you can reach out to me if you have a specific question about how a narcissist is created, because a lot of people want to understand, well, why do they do this stuff? Why do they do these things? Because you don't do these things. You're the opposite. You're a good person. You don't need to put on a fake mask to get people to like you. You can just be yourself with anybody, and you're totally content with who you are, whether people like you or not. Like, of course it might bother you if someone's mean to you and doesn't like you, and you want to understand why, but at the same time, it's not going to drive you to then hurt that person. It's not going to drive you to just lose yourself. The narcissist has none of that. So they need to seek supply. So they're an empty vessel. So think of them as, or think of all of us as, I think there was an author that used that terminology, your love tank. Everybody has a love tank, a tank of something. So think of, you have an inner tank of resources, of self-love, an inner self-love, authenticity, a place that you can go, your self-esteem, that you know who you are is the core. It's the core of who you are. And you know in that core that you're a good person, and that, you know, people like you, you have talents, you also have imperfections, but you can see yourself objectively and you're content with who you are. You know who you are, and you have this tank filled with these resources. The narcissist has a tank that's empty and full of holes. And they seek constantly to fill it up with something outside of themselves because they have nothing inside to fill themselves with. You have inner resources. Like I said, you have an inner knowing of who you are, even though sometimes you can get confused about who you are, and you know, things can happen to you and you can start to question yourself. If you've been abused, you're like, who am I? Why did I do, you know? But when you heal through the trauma and you heal through the things that happened to you, and you self-reflect, you go within, you have the ability to self-reflect because you have that tank within you that is filled with who you are, your self-esteem, your convictions, your ethics, your morals, who you are. You have all of that in there. You know where you come from. You know what you stand for. You know all that stuff. And when you're feeling confused or hurt or conflicted, you have the ability to go within yourself. And whether that is, you know, you have people in your life, whether you have a priest in your life, someone spiritual in your life, you have a church community, whether you have maybe a yoga community, or you have some other type of community where you commune, maybe it's your family, maybe it's your friends. You have people that you can go to share these things with, and they can let you know, yeah, you're amazing, and you have this way to uplift yourself. You don't go to these people to get validation, but you go to these people because you have support. You have people that hear you and understand you, and you're able to go inside and be like, yeah, I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna go within, and I'm gonna try to understand why. You know, why do I keep allowing people to hurt me? Or why do I think I need to help everybody or please everybody? You have that ability to go in there and do that. And the narcissist doesn't. They have none of that ability. They're fake people. They're not real people. That's why you'll hear people say they don't have a soul, because that inner sense and that inner being is your soul. It's who you are. That's who you connect to in your dark moments or your confused moments. They don't have that. They don't have a soul. They're empty. Their tank is empty and full of holes. So what do they have to do to survive? They have to take from others. And how do they take from others? How do they get supply from others? By faking empathy, pretending to be this caring, charitable person, pretending to have and share your morals and your ethics. That's what they do in the love bombing. They're receiving tons of supply. They receive supply whether it's positive or negative. They don't care what it is, as long as they're getting something from you, if they're taking something from you. So in the beginning, when they're love bombing you, they're getting validation that they're wonderful and they're charming and they're smart and they're doing all these things, and you're giving them praise and love and all this stuff, and you're filling them up. But the problem is that can't be sustained because their tank is full of holes. So it's always going to fade away. So in the moment when they're getting something that they want, they feel happy. But as soon as that moment is over, they're empty again. They're empty again as soon as that moment is over. So when you've been with your abuser and you know there's good times and bad times, and the love bombing and the abuse, when they're getting something that they want, when they're seeming happy, like my abuser, he would have moments when he seemed happy when we'd be getting ready for vacation, or he'd be planning a vacation. I wrote about this in my blog. Like, he got so giddy and excited thinking about it, right? And in that moment when he was thinking about it and talking about it, he was getting supply. But it soon would fade away, and he had to do something else. They have to do something else to constantly fill it in. So when they first meet you and they put you up on this pedestal, and you're feeding their narcissistic supply. You don't realize that that's what you're doing. You think you've met this Prince Charming person, and you have not. And as soon as they get bored, or they start to see that you're just a regular person that is not going to worship them, they start to get bored, and that supply starts to fizzle out. And so then they need to get supply in a different way, so they start the devaluation process. They start treating you bad, they start abusing you, and they're still getting a reaction, so they're still getting narcissistic supply. It doesn't matter if it's drama. It doesn't matter if it's drama, negative, anything that you're doing to give them emotion is giving them supply, and they're stealing your energy. They're stealing your energy, they're stealing all of that from you. That's one way of getting supply. That's why they hold on to people. That's why with my abuser, when I tried to break up with him in the beginning of the relationship, within 6 months, I didn't want to be with him. Why he held on so tight? Like, why? What kind of man wants to force a woman into a relationship? Like, he forced me into this faux relationship that was never a relationship, because a relationship is two people that equally care about the other and equally want to give to the relationship. You don't have relationships with the narcissist. I know we say, well, and I had a relationship with my abuser. You never really had a relationship with them. You were in bondage to them. They were having a relationship with their own imagination, and you were having a relationship with what you were hoping that they would be. Like, you were having a relationship in your mind with the person they were when they were love bombing you. They just have a made up reality altogether in their mind. So this isn't a relationship. It's not that at all. So when you're with them in the beginning and you were responding to all the love bombing, that was feeding them narcissistic supply. But as with anything, you can't sustain that type of relationship. In the beginning, you're always excited and lovey-dovey when you meet someone, even when it's a healthy relationship. It's lovey-dovey and great, and you get all the love and feel-good hormones going on in the body. Well, then real life starts to happen. And if you're two healthy people that love each other and care about each other, you're going to gently, deal with these waves, these ebbs and flows and waves and things that come to life. Sometimes the waves are really strong and they crash and they cause damage, and sometimes the waves are gentle. Like, healthy people know that in relationships. The narcissists know. As soon as the waves start coming, they're like, oh, well, you're not as perfect as I thought that you were. I'm getting bored with you. You were like this fun, fancy new toy, and now you're just not measuring up anymore. You're not giving me the supply anymore because you're a normal human being. And you can't always be on that love high, right? It's just not how it works. But the narcissist doesn't see it that way. They see everybody. They do not have whole object relations, meaning they do not see people as multifaceted. I talked about this in the other video, one of my other videos. They see you as all good or all bad. And either one, they're going to get supply from. As long as you're giving them emotion and giving them attention, they're getting supply. They're getting fed something. Even if they act like, horrible monsters when they're angry and evil, that's giving them supply. Another way that so that's how they kind of do it in relationships, through the cycles, through the love bombing, then the devaluation, and then the discard. Then they will get supply either way. But in the beginning, when they start realizing that you're a normal person and you can't just constantly be kissing their ass and worshiping them, they start to get angry, because to them, every nice thing that they do for you is a transaction. It's a transaction to get significance or to get supply. My abuser would just want supply and validation for everything that he did. If he fixed my leaky sink, he expected me to jump up and down literally and praise him and post it all over social media and tell the entire world what a fantastic boyfriend he was. And if I didn't do it to that specification, he was angry. He would tell me I'm ungrateful, and I never thank him, and I treat him like a commodity, and then I'm just using him. And I'm like, you used me to trick me to get into my home. You did something that a boyfriend should do for his girlfriend. He should want to help us not have a leaky sink, and you should do these things without expecting praise. That's just how I grew up, and that's how I view relationships. We do things for each other without expecting thank yous and praise. Now, some people need praise, and they're usually narcissistic or insecure people if they need praise. Now, I'm not talking about a person, I'm not talking about how you feel with the narcissist, because you see, you'll give and 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 give because they make you believe, because they want that narcissistic supply. They make you believe. That's why they gaslight you, and that's why they work so hard to blame you for everything, to make you believe you have to work for their love and work because you're not adequate. There's something wrong with you. So they make you go crazy in your mind, thinking that it's you, and thinking that you have to do all these things for them to get their love. They make you think that because they want supply. They want you to work hard to please them. They want you to worship them. They want you to beg them to love you, because that feeds them. That feeds their ego, and it feeds them and gives them narcissistic supply. So they deliberately gaslight you and make you feel like you're crazy. They deliberately blame you for everything and cause you to question yourself, to think you, and they deliberately try to make you think you're a bad, horrible person. So you work extra hard to please them and get their love so that they can get narcissistic supply. This is why they do it. They do it to feel significant. If you're begging for their love, they are in nirvana. That's nirvana to them if you're begging for them to love you. Literally. And I have many clients that have literally cried and begged their narcissistic partner to love them. Simple things like, love me. Why can't you love me? The narcissist will drive you to that place on purpose to get supply, to get significance, to feel superior to you, because they get a rush of adrenaline, they get a rush of happiness when another person is unhappy, and when that person is begging and pleading them to love them and be a normal person. They're doing this to get supply and to get significance. It's twisted and it's sick, but it's exactly what they do. And my abusive ex-sociopath, who was diagnosed antisocial, did this all the time. But I didn't cooperate. And a lot of it, that's why he physically abused me so severely, because I'm not naturally the kind of person that's going to worship you. I am who I am with everybody. I'm going to be who I am with everybody. I'm going to be myself. And in my relationships, we don't run around and do things for each other so the other person owes us. I hated when he would do things for me. It got to that point where I hated when this man would do things for me, because I knew my thank you wasn't going to be enthusiastic enough. I wasn't going to be, he was going to attack me because I wasn't giving him the validation that he needed. I owed him. He always made me feel in no uncertain terms that I did this for you, so now you must do this for me. You owe me. And he believed that's how relationships worked. Even though he had a string of relationships that didn't last more than 6 months, my relationship with him lasted the longest. It was 3 years. And his wife before me, it was 3 years. And that was only because they had a child. I think if she hadn't had her child, she would have left him after 6 months like most everybody else. I didn't have a child, but he knew, he took advantage of my empathic nature. And he abused me horribly because he was starting to see the pattern in his life. Because as the narcissist gets older, they do see the patterns in their life. They don't stop, but they amp up their abuse. Their abuse gets worse and worse because they start to see this pattern of people not wanting to be around them. And they get internally, they get rageful inside. So each new supply is going to get abused worse and worse. So he was starting to become aware of the fact that women were not wanting to be with him anymore. We're not responding to him anymore. And he would get in a rage. And these are all things I have just figured out through my healing process and trying to understand why this happened. But he definitely wanted to be paid back every time he did something, anything nice for me. He used to say, towards the end of the relationship, when he hoovered me back like the third time or the second time. There were 3 times that he was hoovered, so this might have been the second time. I didn't want him home. I didn't want him back. I wanted him to go live at the sober living facility where he was supposed to go, and he didn't do that. And he just came back to my house and kind of pushed his way back into my life. It almost just kind of happened without me. Like originally when he just moved into my house, he just like steamrolled over me. And anyways, one of the things he kept saying to me is like, I've been cuddling with you, Candace. I've I've been cuddling with you. So, and I would stand there thinking, why is that something that you're bringing up? Like a normal, healthy person doesn't, they cuddle with their partner because they want to. You don't do that to get paid back. But the narcissist does. And most relationships with a narcissist, the intimacy goes away. It disappears because they use that as a way to get you to beg for love. And that's why I said, I have many clients that will tell me the same thing, that they begged and cried and pleaded for the narcissist to be intimate with them and to love them. And then the narcissist will turn around and tell them that they're just like a crazy nymphomaniac and all they do is care about sex. And why do you even care about sex? And it's like, women, that's not what we want. We want love and intimacy. We're human beings. Like, there's nothing wrong with wanting that, but the narcissist will withhold it deliberately. So most relationships with a narcissist, even if the sex is hot and heavy in the beginning, it goes away. I mean, there's always exceptions to the rule. Some people, I have also heard that the sex was the only time that the relationship was good. And, but far more will say that it just stopped, the intimacy stopped. And this is a tool that they use to get supply. You would think they get supply from the actual sex. They don't. They only want to have sex when they're getting gratification. Everything is about outward stimulation and feeding that desire for outward validation and outward physical stimulation. There's no intimacy involved in it. It's dead. It's dead. Some of the sex with my abuser was the worst, most unfulfilling sexual relationship I've ever had. It was just nothing. It was, I talk about it more at great length in my story on my podcast. If you go to my website, you can click on the About, and then there'll be a button that'll take you to my story if you want to do that. But he definitely used it. They will definitely deprive you of love and intimacy and sex on purpose. It is done on purpose. One, because they don't have the ability to have true intimacy, and the only time they want to have sex, it's usually debased sex, or it's usually impersonal sex. Like, they'll just want you to jack them off. I've heard that a lot, that the narcissist just wants you to jack them off, or they'll watch porn. It's just because it's not about you, and it's not about what you want. It's about what they want. But they'll deprive you of intimacy on purpose. And my abuser was doing that to me to get me to beg. To get me to beg for it. There was only one time in the relationship where I got upset, and it was in the beginning, because the only time we had good sex was the first time we had sex. And after that, it was never good. It was always just like empty, nothing, and fueled with crack cocaine and meth. It was abusive. He abused me. He began to sexually abuse me. That's why it was terrible. There was no intimacy and there was no love, and he deliberately denied giving me that. He deliberately denied giving me love, so sex with him was always abusive. It was always abuse was associated with sex with my abuser, and if I wanted love and intimacy, nope, you're not getting it. And then if I brought it up, like I said, I only brought it up one time, and he, of course, true to narcissistic form, it's all your fault, Candace. It's all your fault. And I'm thinking, how is this all my fault? Like, I've never been with a man where I had to have this discussion. How is this my fault? Like, we're not going through any, I mean, I could see when people go through a midlife crisis, people go through change of life and different things, that kind of ebbs and flows in the relationship. But it just like was cut off, ended. And only time it happened was when it was abusive and drug fueled. That's all that he wanted. He wanted abusive, drug fueled shit. Nothing normal or intimate. And I would bring it up all the time. Why can't we just have normal sex? Why can't we be intimate? And he's like, well, it's your fault we don't. And I'm like, how is it my fault we don't? I keep bringing it up and you just shut me down and say it's my fault. Because he was trying to get me to beg. He was trying to get me to plead. They love it when you're doing that. That gives them supply. That is part of getting the narcissistic supply. It's all very calculated and done on purpose to get you to feel beneath them, to get you to feel like shit, to get you to break down so you get to that point where you're begging them to love you. And that is absolute 1000% true, and they do it. And there's too many of us with the same stories. They have the same MO. It was deliberately designed to get you to beg them for love so that they can get narcissistic supply. That's how they get supply. That gives them significance. It gives them a sense of power. I remember one time my abuser would make comments that he hated me for the fact that he was attracted to me. He's like, I hate, in his mind, I couldn't understand why he said that, because in his mind that meant power. That meant I had power over him, and he wasn't going to have that, so he deliberately took it away. sick, but that's what they do. Everything is a game of power for them. Other ways that they get significance and supply is by faking empathy. This is very common with the communal narcissist. The communal narcissist, that's the leader of a yoga group or the leader of a church or anything within the community, a charity. They are going to pretend to be a do-gooder. They're going to pretend to be that charitable person that picks up hitchhikers. That's what my abuser used to do. He'd pick up hitchhikers and then turn around and tell me what an amazing person he was. I'm like, picking up like, that doesn't make you, like, shut up. If you did a good thing for somebody, you don't need to brag about it. But that's what they do. They're very subtle about it. But if you're experienced with narcissists, you will spot them right away. It's almost, you have to be experienced with narcissists to see the games that many of them play. But they will seek significance through community in that manner, by getting people to believe that they're a good, wonderful person, and they will fake empathy. They pretend. They truly don't care about the members of their church. They truly don't care about the members of their yoga studio. It's purely to get narcissistic supply. When people are coming to them as some guru that they worship and they give money to and they give energy to, that's feeding the narcissist. And many of them are in the New Age community. There's so many of them. I would say about 80% of the New Age gurus in communities are communal narcissists. But I know a narcissist when I see them. I know a thing or two about narcissism. I know quite a bit about it. Unfortunately, those of us that know a lot about it can spot them. So that's a way that they get significance and they get supply. And just by getting attention outwardly from other people to give them validation. And this is why many times my abuser would get triggered into a narcissistic rage, is when I wasn't giving him the supply that he needed. If I wasn't begging him for love and attention, if I wasn't worshiping him, he would manufacture situations where he could blame me and make me the bad person. And I would be like, no, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, what? And he would go into a rage and scream and yell at me to get me to admit that I was wrong. Like, they use these coercive techniques, and my abuser was in the military, so he knew a lot of these techniques he would use on me to get me to make false confessions and false apologies just so he could get supply. That gave him supply to get me to say, okay, I'm sorry, you're right, I cheated, I'm a terrible person. That gave him supply and significance. Like, he would rage and scream and scream and scream till I break down and give him what he wants. That is how they get supply. But they go into the rage and they get the narcissistic injury for seemingly like you probably didn't even do anything wrong. You just didn't worship them in the manner that you should have worshiped them, or you questioned something that they did, or you're like, I think you got us lost. And then they'd rage and scream, no, you got us lost. I'm like, wait a minute, you're the one driving. I'm just sitting. I always got blamed for getting us lost, even though he was the one that was always driving. Like, he couldn't even admit to that. He couldn't even admit and be like, gosh, man, I don't know where we're going. I messed up. No, couldn't say that. Candace, you're a terrible car captain. You don't ever have my back, and blah, blah, screaming at me. That was his favorite place to rage, in the car, where he could keep me trapped. It was terrifying. But because you're not just like worshiping them and saying, oh, you're just so wonderful. It's okay. It had to be my fault that we got lost. That's what they want you to do. But I would never do that. I'd be like, well, how is it my fault that we're lost? I'm not the one driving. I'm not the one with the GPS. Like, how do I have the blame in this? And because I would do that, I didn't just like concede. That caused a narcissistic injury. That's how my abuser got narcissistic injuries. His narcissistic injuries were when I would reject his gaslighting and when I would reject his criticism of me, which was constant. Every single day. And his assigning of motivation to me, telling me what I think, telling me what I feel, telling me why I'm doing this, telling me that he knows me, and telling me all these things, and I'd be like, no. That would cause a narcissistic injury within him. And he'd be like, well, why are you always so defensive? And I'm like, well, it's a normal human reaction to be defensive when someone is constantly attacking your very existence. They attack your very existence and who you are. They go on a campaign to destroy who you are. So you don't exist. So you only exist for them. And in their mind, if you only exist for them, that's prime narcissistic supply. That's how they get it. So they get filled up with your energy, your emotions. They get filled up with self-esteem by hurting you and causing you pain and making you beg for love. That gives them narcissistic supply. They'll go out into the public and pretend to be a nice person. They don't care about those people. They don't care about that person that they gave a ride to. They really don't care. They're only doing it to make themselves look good. That's all, the only reason they're doing it. That's the only reason they want status. They want the nice car, the nice house. They want people to look at them and be jealous. And they, when my abuser fixed the sink or put in a new sink that I paid for, he wanted me to blast it all over social media and show all my family, so all my family and everybody would say, oh, Candace, you have such a great guy. He put in a sink. In my mind, that's not something I need to be putting on social media to brag about. Like, that to me doesn't make someone a great person. That makes somebody doing what they're supposed to be doing. But he did have one thing that he held over me that I actually felt guilty about. I had a back bathroom. Now, my husband, before my abuser, was an alcoholic, and he spent most of his time drunk. He was an addict. And I had a second bathroom that I wasn't able to use because it needed like a new thing for the toilet. It needed something, some kind of plumbing, something done, and I could never use it. And so I used it as a storage area. Well, when I met my abuser, his mission was to get me back my bathroom and to fix my bathroom. And that's one of the things that he did to kind of to make me think that, oh gosh, this guy really loves me and cares about me. But do you know, he threw that in my head, threw that in my face every single day that he did that for me. And I was truly happy to have my bathroom, that I could use it. Now, mind you, he didn't do it exactly right. Like, to flush the toilet, you don't push down on the lid, you have to pull up on the lid. Not the lid, the handle. So in a normal toilet, you push down on the handle and it flushes. He did something wacky where I have to like push up for it to flush. Whatever. But I was just so happy to have my bathroom. And he used that against me. They will do things for you and use it against you. And he threw that in my face all the time. I did this for you. I did that for you. I did this for you. And in his mind, that was a excuse to abuse me. So he would expect a certain type of praise, an expectation of worship. And I don't worship people. Like, I was very happy he did that for me. But I also was being abused at the same time. He was mentally abusing me. So I didn't trust him. I didn't feel intimate with him. I didn't feel close to him. He was denying me intimacy. So all these things he was doing to me and fixing my bathroom. He'd already started like the abuse. So I was not like overly excited and happy about him at all. But he did do this for my bathroom. And my point in saying this is, that was one of the things that made me feel like, oh, but he did this for me. He did this for me. And it worked because he got me. He tricked me and got me to be grateful for him, to feel like I owed him something. I felt like I owed him something. Now I realize, so you fixed my bathroom. My partner now is a general contractor. He picked apart the entire bathroom and how it wasn't really fixed that well, and it wasn't really that good, and you should have had a professional do it. Now I don't feel any special feelings for him about fixing my bathroom, because I realized, no, I could have had anybody fix that bathroom, right? If I really, really was determined, I could have found someone to do it. But I was using it as a storage unit, and I was disappointed that I didn't have it. I was disappointed in my husband for not getting it done. But I realized that the narcissist just did it to get significance, to get validation. He didn't do it because he cared about me. That's my point. He didn't fix my bathroom because he loved me and wanted me to be happy. He did it so then I had to owe him narcissistic supply. I owed him validation. And because I didn't praise him like he wanted, he threw it in my face all the time. And even if I had appraised him, that would have worn off and he'd have found something else to bitch about. So they will do things only for significance and transaction. And that's to get narcissistic supply, because they're dead and empty inside. They don't do anything just to do something nice and lovely for a person. They expect to be paid back. You owe them. And I got to a point, for real, where I dreaded birthdays, Christmas, anything where I was getting a gift from him. I almost would want to say to him, like, just don't buy me gifts. And I actually did tell him one time, I'm not a person that likes gifts. So I would stop, so he would stop trying to get me things. There's a story in one of my podcasts where he bought a vacuum, and he bought it for me as a gift. And I thought the vacuum was something we were just going to go to the store to buy together, right? I didn't expect him to go run out and buy me a vacuum without me being there to help pick it out. But he went out and bought a vacuum, and then he came home, and I said, where were you? He's like, oh, and you bought a vacuum. I go, oh, you bought a vacuum? Because in my mind, I'm like, what? We were supposed to do that together. You went and bought a vacuum? He went into a complete rage. Sorry, my dogs. Shush. They hear a tractor, they hear anything, they lose their mind. So narcissistic supply is simply something that is needed, that they need for significance, to fill themselves up, because they are dead and they are empty, lifeless people. Guys, stop. I must have somebody coming, or someone's doing work outside. So that is what narcissistic supply is. The narcissist is an empty person seeking validation, seeking significance through the eyes of others. If you want to hear more about this, please connect with me. Send me an email. unlivingthelie.com is my website. unlivingthelie@gmail is my email. And leave comments below. If you relate to this, hit subscribe and share. Share this with anyone that you think needs it. And we will talk again soon. Namaste.